artist, a writer, storyteller, technologist. I'm a father, sometimes a pirate, which goes along with being a father. I've written, yeah, arg. I've written a bunch of books, and they're filled with art and drawings and secret notes about what it means to be alive. People are always asking me, what are your books about? Well, they're not about anything in particular. They're sort of about everything in general. It's my last book was called Theories of Everything. That should give you a sense of it. It's like theories of everything. So they're the kind of books that you write if you know that you don't know anything really, but you still have opinions about it. Here's my 5 best tips on how to be creative. You know, I'd give you a list, and you'd write it down, and then you'd try it. Maybe they'd work, maybe they wouldn't. After about a month, you'd forget everything anyway. So I don't think we're going to go that direction. While I was working on this, I had this epiphany. I went, wow, you know what? Creativity is not a separate skill set. It's not something that you work on. Creativity is bred in the bone. It's how we make sense of the world. So trying to get more creative by following a list is a waste of time. All that stuff about, out of the box and thinking like Einstein and, I love this one, wearing different color socks on your feet. You know, it's like, it's a waste of time. It's really fun, and I would never tell you not to do it, you know, if you're into it, but I'm from California, and I've got a live, let live attitude around that stuff. But it really is going in the wrong direction. It's going in the wrong direction. So I'd have to say the best way of being more creative is being more alive. Because creativity comes naturally when you're engaged and loving the world. So I'd like to start here instead. Ta-da! If you're alive, you're creative. Not in a learning annex kind of way, you know, where you take a weekend course and you go free your inner creative child, but in a really, no kidding, you're an incredible, living, breathing, creative being already. And if you want to be more creative, then do things that make you feel more alive. Do things that make you feel more alive. It's a good place to start. So the big question, so how do you do that? Well, I guess the easy way would be for me to give you 5 tips on how to be more alive. But I think to do it right, I am going to have to tell you a few stories. See, you know, I'll get to it. I'll get to the story. So when my boys were much shorter, I mean really short, we lived in Berkeley, and we had no money. And so to entertainment, what we do is we'd walk to Barnes & Noble, and we'd sit in comfy chairs, and we'd read books. So along the way, we would pass this Italian restaurant, and outside of it, there was this wall, and we'd always see the same 2 guys sitting there. It was their hangout, and we ran into them all the time. And we'd be pushing the stroller, just pushing it along, and we'd come up and they'd go, hey, spare any change? We'd go, these guys right here, that's where we put all our spare change. But the days were beautiful, and we were in no hurry. So we'd hang out and talk with them for a bit, all the same. Sarge and Vinnie. They'd been in Vietnam together in some pretty horrendous stuff. After they got out, they traveled a bit, and then they settled in Oakland where Sarge had a sister. Sarge was kind of a small guy, a little scrawny. Vinnie was big, full-blooded Cherokee, gentle man. They looked after each other. So one day we're coming by, and as we come up, Sarge automatically goes, hey, spare a few bucks? Where Vinnie reaches over and he smacks him on the arms. The little guy, big guy, smack! Said, that's the family, dude. We should be giving them money. So Sarge gets up and goes, oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, he's digging in his pockets, and he's giving me all these crumpled bills, like pushing him on me. I'm going, no, giving them back to me, back and forth, back and forth. I go, Sarge, keep them. We're fine. Keep it for yourself. Sarge stops and looks at me, and he says, you got a beautiful family there. Make sure you teach those boys what's right. I shrug and go, hard to know what that is nowadays, Sarge. He goes, good point. Well, just make sure you don't teach them any obvious wrong then. I like that. Just don't teach them any obvious wrong then. I think about that a lot. I mean, how much we've all been taught things that are obviously wrong. And we know it because when we do it, we feel less alive. That's how we know it. So maybe we don't need to worry so much about getting more creative. Maybe we should be more concerned about working so hard at being less creative. When we first come to this world as children, everything is amazing, absolutely amazing. And yet, you know, you run across cigarette butts and patent leather shoes and bugs and dirt and things you can squish with your fingers. And everyone says, don't touch that. I mean, but when you first come, it's all about, wow, that is not ugly, that's not beautiful, it just is. It's just amazing. But after hearing no for a very long time, you start to figure out that some things are good and some things are bad, and that's just how things are. It doesn't even have to make sense. It's just you have to go along with it so the big people don't get upset with you. And you know, after a while you forget yourself. And you go along with them and you start thinking that's just how things are. But that's not how things are. All that stuff, it's made up. Absolutely made up. By people just like you. Some of them actually knew what they were talking about. But a lot of them, knowing all the people that we do, had absolutely no clue whatsoever, and so none of it makes any sense. So it seems to me that if you really want your creativity to start taking off, you're going to have to let go of that some things are good, some things are bad, and just get back to loving the world. I know it's not as easy as it sounds. I mean, it's that whole follow your heart thing. You know, and I have to admit that thing always confused me, and it took me a very long time to figure out why I was confused. I was confused because it wasn't really my heart I was following. It was my mind that was imagining itself in a heart shape and then going, I wonder what I would do if I were a heart. It's like minds are really tricky that way. I guess the good thing to do would be to figure out a way to get back to your true heart, or at least, at the very least, know that you're heading in the right direction of that, you know, like where you're heading towards being more alive. So when I was in college, I interned at a theater in Chicago, the Body Politic Lab Theater, and I was a playwright, and they had a playwright in residence there, so it was a perfect mix. So one night after the show, I was sitting on stage with him. We were smoking cigarettes. Actually, he was smoking, and I was fake smoking, because I was a runner, and I didn't want that stuff in my lungs. So I was doing that, you know, like, do this and put it in your cheeks, like that. And after a while, you'd puff it out. It was very sophisticated. Anyway, so we talked for a while, and then he reaches over, stubs out a cigarette, and goes, so tell me the truth. Really, why do you want to be a playwright? And this is a serious question, so I wanted to give it a serious answer. And I was 21, too, so I was going to be really serious. I want to be a new and fresh voice, and I want to add to the body of dramatic literature. And he just laughs. He goes, yeah, right. What's the real reason you want to be a playwright? Well, the real reason was this blue-eyed brunette about so tall. And she was an actress, and so I needed to write a play. I couldn't say that. So I said, I don't know, I want to be famous. This is a nice try. Why do you really, really want to be a playwright? He kept asking. I kept coming up with these lame reasons. And after a while, I just gave up. I said, okay, there's this girl. He just smacks me on the shoulder and goes, okay, great. That's more like it. All that other stuff, that was crap. Love is the only reason worth doing anything. The only reason. But will that make me a good playwright? He says, hell if I know, but it'll give you a life worth living while you figure it out. I like that. It'll give you a life worth living while you figure it out. Will loving the world make you more creative? It does for me, but truthfully, for you, I don't know. But it'll give you a life worth living while you figure it out. The people who research creativity have all these distinctions. Like there's 4 or 5 of them. And one of them is creativity with a little c. That's when you, on the way to preschool, you make up a song with your child. My elder son and I used to do it all the time. Here's one that we would do. Go, Sharkmobile, na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na, Sharkmobile, na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na, cruising along, chewing up the people's bones. Those are timeless lyrics if you have boys. There's creativity with a pro C. That's if you do creativity for a living. And another one is creativity with a big C. That's if you do world-changing creativity where people give you medals and prizes and keys to cities and stuff like that. The thing about those distinctions is that they're made for researchers so they can give points to creativity and say, this is little creativity and this is big creativity. But that's creativity from the outside looking in. From the inside looking out, the creativity we experience is all the same. Creating a sparkling conversation, or making up songs about coffee while you wait for it to brew, or decorating a table, writing a book, editing a film, starting a business, discovering DNA. You know, it's all creativity, and it all feels the same because it comes out of the way we're being alive in the world. It comes out of the way we're being alive in the world. So that's how it feels is the grace of creativity. And I'd say, well, the only way I can explain that is with Zen lawn mowing. So you know about Zen lawn mowing? No, you don't. I'll tell you about Zen lawn mowing. I learned about that from the Reader's Digest one summer when I stayed at my grandparents' farm in Iowa. I'm not sure that's what it was really called, because it was a Reader's Digest in the 60s, but that's how I remember it. So there was the article about this boy who has a customer who says, if you will mow me a perfect lawn, I'll pay you $5. And he says, sure thing, that's going to be the easiest $5 I've ever made. So he mows the lawn in about 15 minutes, comes up, he sweeps the grass into off the sidewalk into the grass, and then he marches up the stairs and say, done, I did your $5 lawn. She took one look at it and goes, that's a start, but that's only a $1 lawn. So the gauntlet had been thrown. No, he would have that $5 lawn. So all summer long he worked, and he spent more and more time getting closer to the lawn. So he went from 1 to 2 to 250 to 3 to 4. And at each step, he became more and more in tune with the lawn. And he wasn't even from California at the time. So one Saturday morning, he wakes up and he goes, this is going to be the day for the $5 lawn. So first he mows from one direction, then the other. And then he rakes the whole thing, and he goes around the whole edge with his mother's manicure scissors and clipping all the stray blades of grass. Now, it took him 4 hours. It felt like only a few minutes. He marches up the stairs and says, you've got to come down and see it. They stood in the dappled light together, and after a while, she turned to him and said, now that is a $5 lawn. But it was much more than $5. That lawn had taught him the value of time and care and joy in being here. So it was so much more than $5. It was a gift of connection to the work that one does in the world. I can say that now, but at the time I can tell you from experience that there are very few things that inspire a 12-year-old boy. $5 is one of them. So I came back to Chicago. I immediately marched over to my next-door neighbor, and I said, Ms. Jorgensen, I'm going to cut your lawn for $5, and here's how I'm going to do it. Anna Jorgensen was a Swedish immigrant in her late 60s. She listened to me, and she nodded, and she said, I'll give you 50 cents. So it was a good deal, actually. After I mowed the lawn, she'd invite me in and into her house, and it was a very different house than our house. We we had a standard Suburban, but she had Mexican skeletons and African masks on the wall, and cloth with bits of bone and mirror hanging all over the place. She'd invite me in, and she'd give me a glass of Ovaltine and violet candies from Spain made from real violets. And then she'd wind up her old Victrola record player, the one with big, thick records, and we'd listen to music that not a lot of people even know anymore, like Al Jolson, well, Gershwin, people know Gershwin, and the great Italian tenor Enrico Caruso. And then she'd tell me stories of her life. I mean, it really wasn't a bad deal at all. When Anna was 18, she immigrated from Sweden. And on the trip over, she met a coal tender on the boat, and they had big plans. When they got their start in America, they were going to be married. She was a maid at one of the big hotels in Chicago on Michigan Avenue. And one day, toward the end of her shift, the front desk sent her up to one of the suites on the top floor with a stack of fresh linens. So she knocked on the door, no one answered, but she could hear noises inside. So she knocked again, still no one answered, so she let herself in. She told me she was just going to slip inside and set the linens on a chair when she caught a glimpse of a man in the salon of the suite. Before she could slip out the door again, he started to sing, and she was transfixed. She sat and listened. It was the great Enrico Caruso himself, and he was preparing for that night at the Opera House. So he moves his arms, he's singing, he half turns and sees her sitting there, and he smiles, and he glides over to her with those small floating steps that he was famous for. And he knelt down before her and took her hand in his, and he sang an Italian love song to her. Caruso looked directly into her eyes and sang to her, and when he was done, he kissed her hand, and she rose and curtsied and floated out the door. The next day, she broke off her engagement with her fiancé. It's like hard to compare. And she packed her bag, and she left. She didn't tell anyone where she was going, but go she did. She studied with yogis in India. She built a mud hut in the lower Himalayas. She took a tramp steamer to Turkey, where she studied with the weavers there and learned to dye and weave cloth for 3 years. And more like this, and more and more. She was filled with stories. This is what she told me about that afternoon with Caruso. She said, "This may not make sense to you now, but someday it will. He sang my heart alive. He sang my heart alive." It was a gift, and with it she became a creator of life and the world. It was a gift she passed on to me through her stories. When that happens, everything we touch comes alive. Our creativity is like breathing. It's because we're living fully, and we fit in this world perfectly. Not an abstract idea of perfectly, but this exact moment, perfect in itself. Like the smell of fresh cut grass on a summer's morning, perfect in itself. The taste of Ovaltine and violet candies from Spain while Caruso sings on scratchy records, perfect. A young boy from Chicago, now a man, who still carries Anna and her stories in his heart, perfect. When it happens, it's something we know to the core, and it sings our hearts alive. You never create something from nothing. You create something from other somethings, out of the fabric of your life, out of the people and things that you love, the experience of your body in this oh-so-lush world, out of your imagination and spirit and the moments that sing your heart alive.